So lately I've been getting a lot of questions about this form 0008 or the generic application for Canada, especially on the contact details section where people are confused about who's residential and whose mailing address to put. So let's understand what residential and what mailing address to use when you're not using any representative, when you're using your sponsor as a representative, and when you're using a paid representative. So before we begin, let me just give you an overview. We are talking about the form 0008 or the generic application form for Canada. It's a form which is meant to be filled by the principal applicant, the one who's applying for permanent residence, meaning the one who wants to immigrate. So in this case, it will be your spouse who's applying for PR. And this form is now digital, meaning it has to be filled inside the online portal. So here's the online portal, also referred to as the client-facing portal. This one is meant for the principal applicant, meaning the person who's applying for permanent residence. So your spouse or the principal applicant is going to create their account in this portal using their own credentials and submit the application themselves. And if you're still confused about who needs to create the account when you're using a representative versus not using a representative, or when your sponsor is acting as a representative, then here's a video where I've covered all that in much more detail. So definitely check that out because it's going to cause confusion once you begin your process. So we are inside the online portal now, and for understanding, just assume that I'm the sponsor and my wife is the principal applicant. So we are inside my wife's account. So this is the principal applicant's account, and if you scroll down inside the PA's account, you will see the form section obviously. And as you can see, this form 0008 or the generic application for Canada is a digital form. How do you know it's digital? Because there's no upload button here. You'll either see a start or an edit button here. That means it's digital. It has to be filled inside the online portal. So you're going to click on start or edit, and obviously you're going to see the form and the instructions, and we are not going to cover the entire form in this video because this video is just about the contact details section. So if you want instructions on the rest of the form, then you can check out this video where I've discussed this form in much more detail. Alright, so here's the contact information page, and as you can see, there's a couple of sections: mailing address, residential address, number, and your email address. So mailing address is technically where IRCC would send you all communication about your application. So AOR, biometrics, medical, passport request, or even if they were to reject your application, they would just send all correspondence to this mailing address. So this was more of a practice up until last year, before September 2022 to be exact, when IRCC was still accepting paper-based applications. So if you were to send your application on paper, and let's say they were to correspond with you or return you your package because they rejected it, or even request any physical document from you, then they would need your mailing address to correspond. Okay, so if they wanted to send you any documents, they will send those documents to your mailing address. That's why mailing address is important. But since September 2022, since everything went online, majority of the communication that you will now have with IRCC back and forth is all going to be online. So AOR, biometrics, medical, passport request, and even if they were to reject your application, it's all going to be online. So they're not really going to use your mailing address much, but it's a requirement, it's mandatory, that's why you have to provide it. And they can still send you some correspondence, some documents directly, meaning physical documents to your local address, and that's why it's important to give them the current mailing address. Residential address is the address where the principal applicant currently lives. That's the only distinction. And the residential and mailing address can be the same and they can be different based on different scenarios, which we will cover. But understand the difference between residential and mailing, alright? For any correspondence, they will use mailing address. So let's cover 3 different scenarios and try to understand how you should populate the address sections. So let's say the principal applicant is managing the complete application themselves, meaning they're not using any paid representative or regulated professional, and they're not even appointing their sponsor as a representative. So the complete application is being taken care of by the principal applicant. In that case, obviously, the mailing address has to be of the principal applicant. So let's understand this with an example. I'm the sponsor and my wife, the principal applicant, the one who's applying for permanent residence, is living in India. So she's an OUTLAND applicant and there's no representative. I'm not acting as a representative. We have not hired a paid representative. So this address here is my wife's address in India, wherever she wants correspondence with IRCC. So this is obviously going to be the address where she's living in India because she won't have this address separate from her residential address. It's just going to complicate things. And she would want to receive anything from IRCC at the place where she's living, right? So in this case, when no representative is being used, my wife is simply going to put her home address here wherever she has a personal mailbox where she can receive documents. So ignore this PO box for now, we'll cover that in a second. She doesn't live in an apartment, so she'll leave that. And she does have a street number, so she will put, let's say, 39 here, and all the other fields, make sure you enter all the other fields here, and this will complete her mailing address. So notice she is not given any PO box here, and that's fine. It's not mandatory to give PO box, because if you have a personal mailbox, why would you give a PO box, right? But there is a catch. So here's the guide 5289, and if you scroll down, click on step 3, complete the application, and keep scrolling down until you get to the form 0008 instructions. So if you scroll down here further, under the contact information section, under mailing address, it says here PO box number. The instructions clearly state that if you don't enter a PO box, you must enter a street number, alright? And for street number is simply the number on your house or apartment building. So coming back to this page, she doesn't have a PO box, so she's going to enter the street number here, 39, that's her street number, and the rest of the address, and that's fine. Okay, you don't need to necessarily enter PO box. A lot of people even ask me, do we have to get a PO box in order to enter the address? Absolutely not. Okay, if you have a mailbox outside, then for sure you can list the PO box number. But if you don't have it, just simply go with the instructions, enter the street number here. Okay, let's say if you don't have a street number but have an apartment number, you can still enter that apartment number in the street number, you're still fine, alright? But it's better to stick to these instructions that if you don't enter a PO box, you must enter your street number, alright? Next up is residential address, same as mailing address. So yes, in this case, my wife wants all her correspondence delivered to her home address, and that's why the residential and mailing address are same. So that's why she's going to check yes. Even if, let's say, my wife was an inland applicant and she was living with her sponsor, me, and we were living in the same address, obviously, then also she would check this box, residential address is the same as mailing address, alright? Next up is primary telephone number. So here my wife can simply list her India telephone number with the country code. They are not really going to call, but it's good to list the accurate telephone number here. And in alternate telephone number, she can just provide my telephone number because I'm her spouse. So it helps to provide an alternative telephone number of the spouse. Next up is, do you want us to contact you using the email address used for this account? This is also where people get confused. So what they're asking is the email address that you must have used to create the account in the PR portal. Do you want us to contact you using that email address? So the principal applicant, meaning my wife in this case, must have used her own email address to create the account. So obviously it has to be a yes, because that's where she would want to receive all communication. So the principal applicant must check this yes radio button so that they are going to use the email address that you use to create the account. So you're not really going to have to enter any email address here, because they already have the email address that you used when you were creating the principal applicant's permanent residence portal account, alright? So when the principal applicant assigns the sponsor as the representative, meaning both the principal applicant and the sponsor sign a single 5476 that appoints the sponsor as a representative, then the sponsor can receive communication on behalf of the principal applicant's application. So AOR, biometrics, medical, passport requests, all that is going to be delivered to the sponsor, who's now acting as a representative, at their email address. Keep in mind, even in this case, when sponsor is acting as a representative, it must be the principal applicant who should create the account in the online portal using their own email address and submit the application themselves. The sponsor can obviously assist them in doing the application, but it should be from the principal applicant's account. These updates went into action October 2022. So if you submitted the application to sponsor your spouse from the sponsor's account before October 2022, you're probably fine. I also did the same thing and there were no issues. But going forward, keep in mind that it has to be from the principal applicant's account. Also, for more details on this particular scenario and these cases, check out this video again, which is linked in the description below. So let's take our example. I'm the sponsor and my wife, the principal applicant, has appointed me as the representative. So in this case, as you can see, the instructions clearly state that if you wish to authorize the release of information from your application to a representative, me in this case, indicate their email address, meaning the representative's email address and the representative's mailing address in this section. This means that my wife has to put my address here, the sponsor's address who's acting as a representative. So this is the complete representative's address. PO box is empty, which is fine. I've already put the street number. So this is in adherence with the instructions that I showed you on the guide 5289, that if you don't list PO box, you have to list street number. We have done that. And all the other fields are complete. So now technically all communication is going to be directed to this representative's address, meaning my address. In this case, they're not really going to send anything because it's all email, but we have adhered to the instructions now that because I'm acting as a representative, my mailing address is provided here. Next up is residential address, same as mailing address. So this can go two ways. Let's take my example first. I'm the sponsor, acting as a representative, living in Canada, and my wife, an OUTLAND applicant, is living in India at the time. So obviously her residence is in India, and the mailing address that she's providing is of a representative. So in this case, the residential and mailing address are different, and that's why she's going to select no and provide her complete residential address here. So again, you make sure you enter all the required fields and don't forget the postal code. Just provide your complete residential address here, and that's it. So now let's look at the second case. My wife applied inland, meaning under the spouse or common law partner in Canada class, and she's living inside Canada with her sponsor, who's also acting as a representative. So in this case, the mailing address is still going to be of the representative, which is me, the sponsor, but her residential address is also going to be the same as mailing address because she's residing at the mailing address, right? Then telephone number, just make sure you enter numbers here under primary and alternate sections. They're not really going to call. Then fax number, if you don't have it, leave it blank. It's also optional. Okay, so next up is email address. So pay attention here because this can get confusing. Remember our case, the sponsor is acting as a representative. So all communication according to the instructions is going to be delivered to the sponsor. Where? To their email address on file. So that's why they need to have the sponsor's email address so that they can send AOR, biometrics, medical, everything to the sponsor's email address. So they're asking, do you want us to contact you using the email address used for this account? And the email address used for this account means that the email address that was used to create this account. So this is the principal applicant's email address who used their email address to set up this account, because we are inside the principal applicant's account. So that's why the answer becomes no, because you don't want to use the principal applicant's email address because clearly you've appointed your sponsor as a representative. So their email address must be provided so that all communication can be directed to the sponsor. That's why the principal applicant should select no. And this is where principal applicant should provide the sponsor's email address. So don't get confused here. It's still the principal applicant who creates the account in the portal using the principal applicant's email address. But here they provide the sponsor's email address because they've appointed the sponsor as the representative. Now, when you're using a paid representative, meaning a licensed professional, whether it's an immigration consultant or a lawyer who's submitting the application on your behalf, then they are probably going to submit the application through a representative PR portal. So what you see on the screen here is the representative permanent residence portal. So this is very similar to the regular PR portal which the applicants use, but this one is meant for representatives. So you're not going to have access to this portal. I'm just showing you for general awareness. This portal right here, what you see on the screen, is meant for principal applicants. So this is the client facing portal. This is the one where principal applicant creates the account. But this page is for your licensed representative to complete and submit online permanent residence applications on behalf of their clients. Alright. So your representative will likely already have an account in this portal which they must have created using their own email address and password, meaning the representative's credentials. So let's say you're one of their clients. So what they're going to do is they're going to start an application for you, at which point you're going to be notified. And then they will start filling out forms for you, uploading documents and all that stuff. Basically, they are managing the complete application for you. So assume that this is the representative portal and we are inside the application that the representative is managing for you. So obviously, you're not going to have access to this. But just to understand how mailing address and residential address will work. So when your representative fills out this section for 0008 under mailing address, obviously, they are going to populate their address. Okay. Because that's where they want to receive all communication because they are your representative. Then residential address, same as mailing address. So obviously this is going to be no. So your representative is going to select no. And here your representative is going to fill your current residential address, meaning the current address where the principal applicant resides. So that's how the mailing address and residential address will be different in this case. Okay, when you're using a paid representative. And here in the email section, it asks, do you want us to contact you using the email address used for this account? So most likely your representative is going to select yes, because remember the email address that was used for this account is the email address used to create the account in this PR portal. Since this is inside the representative PR portal, which they must have created the account using their own email address, they are probably going to select yes, because they want all communication to be delivered to that email address. So just to reiterate, the mailing address is going to be of your representative, the residential address is going to be the residential address of the principal applicant. They are going to be different in this case, and the email address is going to be of the representative. Alright, so hopefully now you have selected the right address, but have you also selected the right class to apply under, and are you accidentally doing the application under the wrong class? Click here to find out. Bye.